between, countries and politics and domination. Obviously, if you want to influence a certain group or certain nation, you try to make them import your moral values and your method of thinking, and then you have less hostility. The most modern theory about control is, they call it soft diplomacy. Soft diplomacy is by Professor Naik in MIT, Boston, is a new method of the other, without having to, because they are against, there's a new movement in politics that, why do you have to send an army to conquer people, right? And you kill, and then you spend a lot of money and lives, and then people will hate you for it. The best way is to invest in making them think the way you are, and then therefore there is no need to colonize, there's no need to, right? So make them want what we want. That is the new policy. Now, that may be a good thing, and if everybody becomes like an American, that's fine. But that is not fine, because the world is having serious problems from this way of life. Supreme capitalism and becoming rampant, consumerism is taking place. All this advertising and so on is all aimed at the woman, to try to make her buy more, all the cosmetics and so on. Woman has become, actually, since the time of the brother of Freud, Sigmund Freud, who was the great psychologist. So his theories was taken by his brother and made them into commercialized through industry in selling and using the power, the sex appeal of women, and women became a symbol of advertisement from then on until now. They have come. Now this is sort of a world that actually insults women in this way, make them feel that they are actually free, is not healthy, because this impacts on the attitude of governments, attitude of bankers, attitude of, well, it's strange that you need a balance, and therefore the suffering that is happening now in the world, which is the enormous amount of energy consumption, overspending, it's causing global warming. It's the the moral sort of decadence of the banking system, the collapse of the banking system. All that is all interlinked with each other. That tells us that the American way of life, or the capitalist way of life, is going to modify. The Americans themselves are now trying to modify it. They realize that they cannot carry on in this way. And so if they are changing, we might as well try to adopt the most advanced and futuristic means, rather than go and follow the same pattern of women's lib and suffragettes and so on. Fight your way into the society. You don't have to fight, my good sister, because all you need to do in a Muslim society is to say, I want my right, which was 1,000 years ago, and you'll feel many times better in taking that right, because it gives you what we call, in brackets, equality in society. They have behaved in this way and that and so on. So this is what I think the message that I'd like to convey, because I have a feeling for this part of the world, even though I am, I'm a British citizen and so on, because this feeling is a global citizenship. We need to live in this planet, and these huge methods of ingressing on the planet requires collective action. Muslims now are a candidate for improving upon the world, because they're starting to build their nations. They're starting to build a new civilization. So put it right. Don't just be an extension of the civilization of today, which is decaying. Produce a new paradigm, produce new ideas, right? Get out of the box, but make use of the past, your past and the past of the West, past of the East, to produce a better world. That is the message.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
From the Research Council.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Professor, for such an enlightenment. In terms of gender debate, what I got from your talk today, somehow that was addressed somehow. There are means to address the gender debate which we have now today. So how do we go forward that we take the history and move so that we don't get stuck in this gender debate, because what we have today in Oman is women empowerment. Are these means really to go and get across the gender debate, so we reach a point where we can achieve what was achieved in the past?
Thank you. As I said in the beginning of my speech, I am not really very good at this debate myself, because I'm not an expert on the subject. I try to bring out to you what we have discovered, right, in terms of names and so on, and then it's really up to you to make use of this information. I think this tells you to try to get more information, find out more about these. 8,000 women, muhaddithat and so on. Even you're in a mosque here, right? I don't know how many of them you actually know of these people. I don't want to be critical, but I like you as my chairman, very nice looking with nice beard. But I intimate to you, I asked, I said, look, since we're talking about women, can you get me a women chair, for tonight? And I find you my good friend. That's fine, let's go. It's just to break a psychology, because you've got ministers, right? You've got heads of institutions, but I think that the mentality of Islamic people need to be adjusted without causing a threat, right? Because if you are so rigid and so brittle, the difference between, you see this bottle here is because it's flexible, right? It doesn't break. You can squeeze it and it doesn't break. If this was glass, if you try to do this, it will break. The difference between brittle, which is glass, and this is resilient, flexible. We've got to have this resilience. So don't be afraid. I'm sure most of these successful societies, you see them, they were actually sharing a women, right? And their contribution is remarkable. They can really enhance the. I'm looking at some of my bearded, long bearded friends, with due respect, of course. You don't read it that way. You dial it, and you read it against a chart. The drawings is not very clear here. These are hyperbolic drawings. These charts, they are tracing the movement of the stars over a year time. And the way you trace the movement of the stars is you have these what you call armillary spheres, these huge structures on the left, these huge structures. And it's got these arcs that move and a pendulum with a string with a weight underneath. And that one is it goes on the floor, and the floor will have a huge piece of cloth, white cloth, and they will move with the star, each star, and they position this, it goes down, so they will put a mark on the ground, and then come next week, you find the movement of the stars somewhere else. So you have a curve, the trajectory of the stars in the sky being drawn on a flat plane on Earth. And you have so many important stars which are visible, and this is done for these. Now, after that, they reduce it into a small or different sizes. Sometimes it's a pocket size, you can carry with your pocket. Sometimes a large size, like now that. You see that picture there? There's one is held by the hand of one of the professors there, the teachers. But there is one at the back of the masjid, or back of the mosque. It's hanging on the wall. And the idea here is that when you hold it against a star and you dial this disc, there, and you point it, it tells you the time, when it's Fajr, when it's Maghrib, when it's, right, and where you are, like a GPS system. Fascinating. Now, it requires a lot of work, as well as mathematics as well, and engineering, sophisticated engineering, because it's fine, it has to be accurate. And so we found this lady called Al-Ijliya. Now, Al-Ijliya, we've contacted from Halab, and she was at the time of Saif al-Dawla, working in the great castle of Aleppo. And we asked because the Nadim and some other historians, they don't mention her first name. And we want to know what was her first name. We agree with the findings of the Syrian Archaeological Society, but it's not published. They wrote to us. They say her name was Maryam. So we use the word Maryam. But she is from Al-Ijli family, and Al-Ijli, her father was involved in the making of astrolabes as well. And one of the teachers we discovered was a Christian from Halab, who was also helping her in the making of this. Now, obviously, there are many, and these are odd, we find in some odd manuscripts. Now, mathematics. We found another very exciting, interesting lady in Baghdad. Her name is Sutayta Al-Mahamli, right? This is year 987. We found that this lady, because she was so good in mathematics and algebra, she became an expert witness in the courts. You know what an expert witness means? It means using scientific means to prove a certain thing and to decide whether this is correct or not correct. Right? And the judge or the prosecutors or the lawyers will use expert witness to use science to sway the decision. Right? Now, she was a regular expert witness in huge problems, like, for instance, a partnership of building other, and it dissolves. The partnership finishes. So how do you deconstruct the partnership she would visit the building, and she would find out how much of it is built, but how do you calculate the money spent and the effort spent? She'd be using algebraic equations and volume and surface area, right? And to calculate the shares and part and then distribute it accordingly. Same thing with inheritance, and when sometimes some very complicated inheritance calculations would require algebra. There are feuds between business people, right? Needs to be solved, and the judge used to listen to her, and because of the use of her mathematical capabilities. The next one is from another place on earth, which is in Andalus. The Lubana or Labana, or sometimes called Labbana. The quotation here is from a book by S.P. Scott. But she was a scientist, but also a mathematician. She's very, involved in solving complex geometrical and algebraic equations. When we talk about algebraic equation, we're talking about complex algebraic equations. And originally, the algebraic equations, maybe x cubed, x to the fourth, and so fourth order algebraic equations. And the solution of them are very complicated because sometimes you have to use geometrical means to find the solution. So not only just algebraic methods or mathematical methods, but you have to use geometry as well. So she was also quite a good in management, and in the history shows that she was actually a private secretary of Khalifa, the famous Al-Hakam II. The other interesting subject is medicine. Women's involvement in medicine have never stopped for 1400 years, since the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Right. They've always been involved in medicine. And their roles, it's very easy to investigate this, and it's still a very fresh subject. You can find women in medicine in any period of Muslim history, but it is not quite well documented and published. You can go there and get information. You can write papers and become a very famous woman or a man if you take this subject for research, right? So you find in the early years Nusayba bint Harith al-Ansari, there's Asma bint Abu Bakr, and Zainab bin Uud. But I'm going to pick up, there is of course very great, she's probably the first professional nurse. In terms of profession, what I meant, she used to train and give courses for other ladies to teach them medicine. And she was also a great social worker in preventive community medicine, how to organize your life in the family so that you prevent disease, right? The cleanliness and so on, and precautionary medicine, precautionary exercise. So she was, and she was Rufayda al-Aslami. The most, right, I must have, a couple of slides have gone somewhere else. Right, let's come to this calligraphy. Women calligraphers, all along, a lot of calligraphy is actually, the writing describes, is done by ladies. This particular lady of Al-Hassaniya, and the other one is called Safiya, they were very famous in Spain. And their calligraphy was, very special because they use illuminations and so on, and coloring in there. Speeches. Women speakers, and sometimes even public speakers, they appear in literature. Right? And even from the time of the Sahaba, women stand up and say things. In a mosque, a woman challenges a Khalifa, right? They speak, but there are preachers, women preachers, who actually stand up and give lectures, and give whether it is religious or non-religious lecture, a woman would be giving it, and there was no problem in listening to a woman standing up on a podium and speaking. There is evidence of that. Right. Now maybe some of my friends here, men friends may disagree with this, it's fine, but I'm not expressing a view, I'm expressing facts that we see. And take, for instance, this manuscript. It shows a lady, I don't know whether it's as clear, from my angle it's not quite clear, but it shows a lady on the right who's standing in the minbar, and the audience are men and women. Now, there was a book recently have been published in the University of Oxford. This book is 40 volumes, right? All about women of theology, of Quran and Hadith in the early years of Islam. And it contains the names and the descriptions of, how many do you think? 8,000 women. It's called Al-Muhaddithat, right? This is the cover of the book. And I know the author is a great guy originally from India, but he's based in Oxford. And his name is Muhammad Akram Nadwi, originally from Nadwatul Ulama. And this book is just incredible, 8,000 women. And that tells you that, in fact, women were scholars in theology. We're suffering in Europe about allowing a woman to become a priest, right? Whilst in here, you seem to have discovered that men were learning from women the religion of Islam. Now, I am not an authority on the subject, but I find some people tell me that there are famous imams like Al-Imam Ibn Jawzi. He studied under 70 women. Right? Ibn Hazm Al-Andalusi. Right? He was raised and taught by women. Right? Became a faqih through the knowledge of women. So, this gives you a signal. I'm not saying that they were better than men and so on. It gives you a signal that there was not a serious problem, about this. There's no antagonism. There is no fighting. There is no, this tension between men and women. There's a comfort, stable relationship. Otherwise, you cannot have such a relationship. And of course, when you have men and women together, there has to be a suppression of the sexual difference and sexual attraction, because men and women have to be attracted. Otherwise, it happens even to all creatures. A woman has to do something, the male has to do something, so they get attracted to each other. This is natural. So the Muslims have sorted this out through hijab, through ghadh al-nazar, lower your gaze, and therefore you behave like normal human beings, whether a woman or a man talk to a woman, there is a behave, normal professional respect and behavior. This was solved. And hence, I think that's how the society must have resolved that problem. Now, this book is really fantastic, and the attitude of original Muslims and early Muslims and Arabs to even women in history before Islam is interesting, because we you know, I was raised in the West, I've seen films and so on, and you come to the name of Cleopatra, right? Cleopatra? Does everybody, a lot of people don't know about Cleopatra. Now the way Cleopatra has been projected to us is, okay, she was like a queen, but she was a seductive, almost prostituting herself, right, to get to power. Now let us look at how the Muslims describe Cleopatra. This is really amazing. They describe her with such a great honor, right? And they describe her as a person who was bringing all the scholars around her in weekly seminars, right? Circles of knowledge, halaqat al-ilm, right? And they respect her for that. She was distinguished in bringing in the scholars together. This is long before Islam, you know, this is old Egypt. And this is how they project Cleopatra, a symbol of knowledge, a symbol of respect. While we go to Cleopatra in our Western attitude, Western book, she's a symbol of, you know, sex and treachery and seduction. It's incredible. It's the same. And so the other book is another very famous book. This is in Arabic. It's not. It's being translated. It's called Women and Their Publications, their writings. This is a very interesting book. Now, another book which has been recently published is about Ottoman women. You know, Ottoman history is even more suppressed. It's not suppressed by the Europeans only, but suppressed by the Turks themselves because of the problem when the Ottoman state has disintegrated, and then there is a new nationalist government which believed in secular ruling of the state, and they had a problem with their history of the sultans, so they changed the language, the writing from original Arabic script into European script, and so that actually caused a huge difficulty in finding out their history. So now it's coming up with a new uprising of the Turkish nation that is beginning to recognize itself, and the young people of today, they are now beginning to discover their identity. They're digging out a lot of information from thousands and thousands of manuscripts in great libraries like the Suleymaniye Library, Topkapi Library, and so on. This is a very interesting book about Ottoman women. I discovered that the word harim, you know, just like the story of Alif Layla wa Layla, you know, the 1001 Nights, when the European looked at Arabs and Muslims, and they think of the 1001 Nights, that's sort of to do with some strange way of life, Sinbad the Sailor, and so on. And when they refer to Harun al-Rashid, which is, he's the main subject of the story at the time, they accuse him of being a womanizer and, you know, this belly dancing and so on. And the poor guy, you know, Harun al-Rashid used to go conquest 1 year and 1 year for Hajj, right? You know, for pilgrimage 1 year. How could a guy like this? And one of them says in the story, he says, do you know when he used to climb up the stairs, he used to hold the bust of his harem, you know, so that he can go up the stairs. Such terrible, you know, sex symbols. You know, this is incredible. And then the other one is about the harem. You know, but they say harem. Oh, the sultans, they have all these harem, and you can cherry pick any one of them and you know, sleep with them. So, when I dug into what the harem really were, now maybe just only peculiar to the period that we have looked at. You know, harem were the central office of the government. They were in charge of the clerk, the management, the statistics, all the letters, all the accounts, all done by women. Now, that was the harem. It was not only because there are women there not to go in, but also all the secrets of the state were in there. Now, it was run by women. Now, if women have to wear hijab all along because they are mixed with men, then they will feel very uncomfortable, isn't it? So women, when they are with each other, they want to, you know, be free. So how do you solve the problem? How does a man go in the harem, right, in the haram, and then give a warning? You want to give a warning. You know, I went to Saudi Arabia recently. We're establishing some contracts with some universities. They're women universities. Women like our project, by the way, quite a lot. So we have memorandum of understanding and work. The 1000 Inventions is taught as a course, an elective course by Dar al-Hikmah, and we also have a deal now with Iffat University. So when I was taken by Iffat University as a guest, and I was a man, and then there was a lady walking in front of me. She keeps saying, "Man coming, man, coming, man, male is what." So everybody sort of, they all, to protect them from the hijab. So I said to them, "Look here, this problem has been solved by the Ottomans." He said, "What do you mean?" You see, in the harem, it's built out, the ground is built out of marble, polished marble. They have outside there, men have to take their shoes off, and they wear what they call qubqab. You know qubqab? This is the wooden shoe, wooden, click clock, right? That is the signal. So when men walk there, talk, right? So then they know that there is a man coming, and they put themselves right. So that's where the qubqab come. That's a practical application. So I suggested to Iffat University, you don't need the qubqab. Why don't you have these new athlete shoes that make, some children, they like, these athlete shoes, they make sound. You press them and it whistles. Anyway. So the harem there, they were holding, effectively the central government administration. And in there you find all the statistics which they have inherited now. You find some of the manuscripts that will tell you how many eggs are in a farm in the north of Morocco. Hey, this is incredible. How many eggs are laid in there because of the supply and the tax situation. It's all done by the harem, by these ladies. So it's all coming out soon. For hundreds of years, of course, the sultans in the Ottoman state, they have built a great, you got great mosques, great buildings like Sinan, famous architect and so on. But they also had women of philanthropy, like this lady she was called Hurrem. But I must say that women, the problem also, now, I'm not going to be popular with women. They say if you give a woman 1 inch, she will take a mile. That's fear, because, say, just keep them, suppressed and so on, because once they take over, there's no limit. Right now, is this true? I don't know.
Are there any more questions? No more questions? If there are no more questions, thank you very much, Professor, for tonight's lecture, and hope to see everyone tomorrow, inshallah. Subhanak Allahumma nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you.
شراب الحب يعرف بالمذاق وما كل السقاة له بساق شراب الحب يعرف بالمذاق وما كل السقاة له بساق أحب الله عن أدب وصدق ولا أرضى سوى التقوى خلاق شراب الحب يعرف بالمذاق وما كل السقاة له بساق شراب الحب يعرف بالمذاق وما كل السقاة له بساقي. أحب الله عن أدب وصدق، ولا أرضى سوى التقوى خلاقي. إذا ما عشت لا أنسى إلهي، به أسمو من الأخرى المراقي. يعز علي ترك الحب عندي، ولو بلغت بي الروح التراقي. تركت جميع خلق الله دوني، شغلت عن الخلائق باشتياقي. شراب الحب يعرف بالمذاق، وما كل السقاة له بساق. شراب الحب يعرف